Hey, this is William DuVall of Alice in Chains, and you're watching for GuitarPlayersOnly.com.
Hi everyone, John Liebman here. You're watching for GuitarPlayersOnly.com. We're coming to you today from the Framus and Warwick booth at the 2019 Winter NAMM Show, Anaheim, California, with our special guest today, Alice in Chains guitarist and vocalist, William DuVall. Hey, William.
Hey, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. It's such an honor and a pleasure to have you here. Thanks for sitting down with us for a few minutes. I want you to have a chance to tell the people your story about your career, your gig, your guitar, music, things like that. Let's start from the beginning. You're originally from D.C. I know you spent a lot of time in Atlanta, but tell me about the earliest days you can remember as far as how you were first exposed to music and how you became a guitar player.
Yeah, well, I started playing guitar at 8 years old, and it was, I think, just a product of being from Washington, D.C., and at that time, so much great music being around, being in the air, and we're talking about, the mid-'70s, 76, when I started. So it was just a great time for music, and specifically guitar music. And I had the good fortune of having a older cousin of mine move in with my mother and me, and he sort of was trying to get away from a rough situation at home, and my mother was always taking in strays, taking in people, and he was family, so it made sense. And he brought his little record collection with him, and he had all kinds of amazing albums by, Weather Report and Santana and Roy Ayers and all these.
How close in age is he?
He's 10 years older, and so I was 8, he was 18. It was a perfect sort of synergy for like a big brother, little brother kind of thing. And the album that really got my attention was the Band of Gypsys, Hendrix, and
it got a lot of people's attention.
Right, yeah. And so, but you can imagine I've never heard anything like that, and so he would put these records on my little show and tell record player that I had, and I started just bombarding him with all these questions, like, what's going on? He's doing all that with a guitar? Like, what do you like? And so my cousin would try to explain, all about feedback and Marshall Stacks and Fender Stratocasters and all this cool stuff.
Was he a musician or just a fan?
He's a keyboard player and just a kind of a jack of all trades. He used to do electronics and all kinds of cool stuff, but it was really that, that served as the catalyst for taking it seriously. I had found this really beat up acoustic in my grandmother's basement, but once my cousin Donald moved in and I found that guitar, it all kind of came together. And the interesting thing is my cousin's copy of Band of Gypsys didn't even have a cover because his collection was all beat up. A lot of the records were scattered all over the place and warped and missing items, and so I didn't even know what Hendrix looked like for a while. So I was just intrigued by the sound. And in those days, of course, we didn't have internet and all that stuff. So when I started just bombarding my cousin with all these questions, he eventually went to the public library and photocopied some pictures of Hendrix from old issues of Rolling Stone magazine.
I'm sure those were black and white photocopies.
They were, and he brought those black and white photos home. And once I saw what Hendrix looked like, that was really the lightning rod. I was like, okay, well, I'm done. This is what I got to do. This is it. My whole life was planned out from then on. And so we played that Band of Gypsys album constantly, along with all the others, Weather Report and Isley Brothers, and we started record collecting. We'd go to old shops, like used record stores and head shops, and get like old Funkadelic records for like $2 or $3, and we just built this collection on and on until he went and finally joined the military, and I kept the collection going, and I got more and more serious with my guitar playing. So with his first paycheck from the military, my cousin bought me my first real electric guitar. It was a brand new 1977 Fender Mustang. After that, I was off to the races. He showed me how to wire it through the stereo so I could have like an amp.
I used to do that.
Play along with the records, man. So that's what started it, That was the whole thing.
What about career-wise? At what point was there a single event that sort of catapulted you, or was it a gradual thing? How did your career get rolling?
It was more like I just was interested in playing music, So I would jam along with records, and as I got into adolescence, like 12 and 13, I really branched out in my musical tastes and had all kinds of things in my collection to play along with. Everything from like Prince and Chic, whatever was on the radio, and like to like Ornette Coleman and James Blood Ulmer and the Stooges, and like I would voraciously read about everybody that I could find out about. And I had when I was 11, I got a subscription to Musician magazine. Remember that magazine, yes. Musician, Player, and Listener? Yeah. That was a really cool thing as well. That was another catalytic event because, they would have, this is like 79, so they had like everybody from Brian Eno, Frank Zappa to like the Art Ensemble of Chicago on their covers, right? And so I was reading all these amazing like articles about these forward-thinking artists, and the writing was good and the music was good. So they would make me curious about what I was reading about, and then I would have to go find the record. So I discovered a lot of great music that way, everything from Robert Fripp to, like I said, Lester Bowie, all kinds of great stuff. And I would get the records, and then I'd start jamming along with that. So my palette grew and grew and grew, and then punk rock hit, like hardcore, like in America, around 80, 81. And that was really the catalyst for, oh, wow, like I don't have to wait to form a band and write songs. I can do this now. It was a very sort of democratizing thing, like anybody can do this. And a lot of people came to punk rock as non-musicians, and they started playing their instrument by being in a band. I was different. I had already been playing for years, and little kid, jamming with my records. And then this force came through with, all these great bands like Black Flag and the Adolescents and all this cool stuff happening in America. And I was like, wow, those guys are a little bit older, but the real thing that I'm getting is that I can do this, This is not some gigantic sort of magical thing that happens that you have to be, sort of like anointed, you can do this. And that was great. And right then, my family moved to Atlanta. And so I left DC just before finding out about the amazing hardcore scene happening in Washington with Discord Records and all the great bands there. Moved to Atlanta where there was nothing going on, and had to kind of carve it out of thin air. We had to make the scene, So it was actually kind of a blessing in disguise. And
excuse me, you were about how old?
14 when I moved to Atlanta, and so was starting high school, and and was a classic misfit toy kind of kid. And so it was a really cool thing, because the only two cats that would really talk to me in my high school happened to, one of them was in the marching band playing the snare drum, so he was a drummer, and then the other guy was kind of more of a stoner guy who got along with everybody. And I was like, you can probably play bass, and I happen to have a bass at my house, so you guys should come over to my house. And they lived in the neighborhood, so that was my first band. It was called AVOC, Awareness Void of Chaos, because every band, punk band had to have an acronym for the name and all that stuff.
I don't know if I should take issue with what you're saying or not. The stoner guy, give him the bass, because I am a bass player.
He was what? Yes, I understand. He was not a Jaco Pastorius in the making, let's just say. And he was more of like, he was just a cool guy. He'd never really played an instrument. And so in punk rock, especially at that time, it was sort of like, well, if you can't really get the guitar together because it's like chords and you gotta like, bass you can play one note at a time. And so if you've never touched the instrument, it's a bit of an easier entryway into just getting your fingers around a neck and pushing down on these metal wires. When you've never done that before, it was sort of like, it was a little bit of a easier doorway to walk through.
Yeah, I interviewed Mike Watt a couple times on for BassPlayersOnly.com, and he didn't like the way the punk rock scene was treating bass players. He said it used to be like the bass, that was like the instrument you gave to your retarded friend. That was his words, not mine. I'm just quoting.
But Watt is a guy who carved a kind of a new and more adventurous path, for bass players and the role that they played in that underground music.
Right. That was
So I
the
can
context
understand.
of his story.
Like, yeah, I can totally understand why he would take exception to that, and it's good that he did, because that is what will motivate you to carve that new path. You know, I dig Mike Watt a lot, man. Like, I've run into him many times over the years.
Interesting guy. It's
Very
fun to
interesting
talk
guy.
to. I sat down with him just like this.
Oh, he's amazing, and he's got many stories to tell and a lot of wisdom to share. And it's funny because he was part of that scene that really motivated me to do what I did in terms of forming bands at like 14, 15 years old, because he was part of that SST record scene with Black Flag. Black Flag was the band. Greg Ginn from Black Flag started SST Records, and the second band that they signed to SST was the Minutemen. So the first record SST put out was the first Black Flag single. The second record they put out was the first Minutemen single. So Mike Watt was really there at the very beginning of that whole thing, and that scene ended up becoming influential for really the entire world and underground rock everywhere. But I kind of got in, like, not necessarily on the ground floor, but close to it in terms of being a fan of all of what they were doing out there. And it was such it was just an amazing cultural force. Like, hardcore punk itself was that force, but then Black Flag and SST within that specific sort of niche was its own really important cultural force.
Let's fast forward a few years and talk about Alice in Chains.
We're fast forwarding more than a few years there. We're fast forwarding about a good 30 plus years, but that's okay.
We will come back, maybe we'll fill in some of the gaps, but our time here is limited, and I want to make sure that we don't miss some of the things that I know that the people want to hear about. Yeah. So talk to me about that band and your involvement and anything that you want to share about Alice in Chains.
Well, I mean, it started with me moving my band Comes With the Fall from Atlanta to Los Angeles in February of 2000. By that point, I had a kind of interesting career path, if you want to call it that took all these weird twists and turns from punk rock through to like to avant-garde music to like pop music. I got into like writing for other people and gave this song called "I Know" that I co-wrote with a cat named Milton Davis to a gal named Dionne Farris, and she took it to the top of the pop charts in '95. So I had done all these crazy things throughout the 80s and 90s, and then right around 99, I formed a band called Comes With the Fall that was kind of a distillation of everything that had happened to me in my musical life up to that point, and recorded our first album in Atlanta, and then kind of through discussions with my fellow bandmates and things, it was just decided, like, you know, they were telling me, like, look, you've done all you can do here. We got to get out of here, you know. My friend Nick was like, we have to get you out of here. That was his words. He was like, we have to get you out of here. You'll die here. And so it was like, okay. And so we thought about New York. We thought about L.A. We decided on L.A., and we moved there in February. We arrived Valentine's Day, February 2000, on February 14th. And from that moment, we kind of hit the ground running, playing gigs all over Hollywood. And through that, a mutual friend had turned on Jerry Cantrell to the first Comes With the Fall album. So as we're playing all these gigs at, you know, the Cat Club and the Whiskey and the Dragonfly and all that, he got hip to what we were doing. It's like, I got to meet that cat. Okay, so we met at the Dragonfly, and from then on, it was like he was hanging with us every day. We lived. The four members of Comes With the Fall lived in this 2-bedroom apartment in West Hollywood, and Cantrell was there all the time. He was there all the time. So we were seeing each other pretty much every day, hanging out. He was finishing his Degradation Trip solo album, and he decided he wanted to try to play some shows around that new music, even though it wasn't out yet. And so in early 2001, we started touring together. And he asked if we would be his band. So we kind of did a Neil Young Crazy Horse thing where we kind of backed him up. But before that, we would always come on and open the shows too. So it was great because I kind of didn't want to answer to the music industry, you know. Like I I didn't go to LA to get like discovered and get signed, you know what I mean? I went to just expand our horizons. I wanted to put out our records. So put out that first album, and then we went on the road with Cantrell. I had a bunch of new music. We recorded our second album while we were touring, put that out while we were still touring with him. Then his album came out in 2002. We kept putting out records as well. We recorded a live album since we didn't have time to get into the studio. So we did like 3 records while we were just touring around, playing our own thing and doing our thing with him. And it kind of paved the way for, you know, what's going on now with Alice, you know, because he really respected what we were doing and how we were doing it, you know, because it wasn't like, again, it was not like I was waiting for some ship to come and rescue me or my band. It was more like, no, we're just documenting what's happening. The party is over here, and if you want to be a part of it, great, you know.
What is going on now with Alice? And pardon me for fast forwarding again, but what's happening now with the band?
Well, we put out our third album with this incarnation of the group. We put it out August of last year, and you know, it's doing really well. We've been touring on it for the past 6 months, and we have.
Tell the folks the title of the record.
It's called Rainier Fog. Rainier Fog, and we.
I think I wasn't sure the first time I read it. I wasn't sure how to pronounce it, so it is
right.
Rainier. It's not Rainier, but Rainier Fog.
Rainier, after Mount Rainier and
Rainier. Okay.
Yeah, in Washington State, there's that big mountain there, the volcano. So it's after that. It's named after that, and so we've been touring on that since August of last year. We have about 6-8 months left of touring on that, maybe 9 months left of touring on that. We're gonna do the whole world again, starting next month, February 2019, and we're nominated for a Grammy for Best Rock Album.
Congratulations.
Maybe they will, yeah. Maybe the Academy will see fit to, you know, let us have this one. Been nominated a few times, to say the least. But anyway, yeah, it's good. It's good. It's cool, you know.
Okay. Tell me about your gear. I mentioned we're at Framus in Warwick. Yeah. So what are you playing?
Well, I play a Framus Talisman guitar. It's a guitar that I designed for Framus, and it's a really, really cool instrument. Basically, mahogany body and neck with maple top, and we put 2 different types of maple on the top, and it's just a really cool, beautiful. It's a visually beautiful guitar, but it's also just an incredibly high-end quality instrument. You know, Framus has the best woods in the world, man.
I've been to the factory 3 times in Magnerkirchen, Germany.
There you go. So you know, and you've seen that wood storehouse they have. It's unreal, right? And Marcus Spangler, who is the head designer, he's a genius.
It's a very detailed tour of all the different kinds of woods.
It really is incredible. I've never seen or dealt with anything like that company, and they're very family oriented, and they are completely green companies. So they're powered by solar and wind.
Right.
And so between all of these things, run by the same family for 70 years in the case of Framus, over 35 years in the case of Warwick Bases, and then you put the green company thing, and then you got the genius of the design.
Have you been over there?
Yeah. He flew. Hans flew us over. My fiancée Teresa and I flew us over there for the 70th anniversary of Framus. We saw the place. We couldn't believe it. They have their own compound over there. It's like a village. It's unbelievable. It really defies description. You have to see it to believe it. But the point is, working with them has been a complete pleasure, a total highlight. The Talisman, like I said, mahogany, body neck, 2 different types of maple for the cap, kind of like a Les Paul, but just even more like refined, and then ebony fingerboard. But really, we can do anything, because that's the thing with their master built series. We can do whatever the player wants. It's really about what the player wants. That happens to be what I wanted, but I don't consider the Talisman to be my signature guitar. I consider it to be your signature guitar, whatever you guys want.
What kind of strings do you play on it?
Oh God, I don't even know. Lately I've gone back to Ernie Ball, I think, and you know, my techs mostly handle that stuff. I'm more of like a I get into the minutia of things like the wood grain, the wood, the tree it came from, the pickups that go in it, all that kind of stuff. Strings, it's more like I loved Ernie Ball since I was a kid, so that's what I use. And gauges, I tend to use skinny top, heavy bottom, but then there's some custom gauging going on there as well.
What about amps?
Amps, again, beautiful situation going on there because I designed an amp called the DVL1 with George Metropolis, who is just a master builder and designer. His specialty is the Marshall amps of the mid to late 60s. But of course, just even within that specific niche is a lot going on because the Van Halen amp, you know, that Marshall Plexi that Van Halen used for the first 6 Van Halen albums, that's a 68, but he was able to get tones out of it that were uncommon for that particular type of amp. He was able to get more sustain and more just balls out of it. He used things like a Variac and all these, you know, Van Halen was a real, for lack of a better word, a tinkerer, you know, kind of like an inventor even back in his younger days. So he was able to get more energy out of the Marshall Plexi, and now a lot of builders of amps have tried to harness that in modern designs, and George is one of the, I think, the best at that. And so he and I have known each other for over 10 years, and finally a year or two ago we got together on this amp, and it came out last year. The DVL1 is an amazing amp. It's two channels but 4 modes. So each channel 1, channel 2, is divisible by 2. So we have a 65 mode, a 66 mode, a 68 mode, and then a mod mode. All of them foot switchable, and 65 is sort of like the Neil Young, Tom Petty kind of a thing. You know, it gets you like somewhere between a Vox and like a 50s Fender Bassman. Yeah. And then the 66 mode is like the real early 100-watt Marshall amps, like that Hendrix was playing when he went to England for the first time, and like the kind of thing that Jeff Beck would have been playing with the Jeff Beck group, or like real early Zeppelin, or like Clapton would have played with Cream. Then the 68 mode is that Van Halen thing. It's this late 60s Marshall circuit board with more balls to it. And then the mod mode gets you into that thing that like Alice in Chains is, you know, Metallica, that kind of thing. More saturation, more gain, more low end, but a tight low end. So we got all that in one amp, all foot switchable, and then we have a mid boost that is accessible to any of the modes. So you can be in 65 mode, hit the mid boost for that like pre-chorus that you just need that little extra something under the vocal, you know. Or you could be in like the heaviest mode, in mod mode, hit the mid boost just for some gnarliness.
Sounds like a great amp. Yeah.
Then we got a dedicated gain boost. So it's like gain boost that has its own EQ and is also accessible to any of the modes. So you can be 65 mode or 66 mode, and then you could take it to like from 11 to 14 and then come right back to where you were. It's
sounds like a one-of-a-kind amp. I've never heard of anything like that. You mentioned the world tour and everything, so obviously that's going to be keeping you busy for a while.
Yeah.
How much can you share about anything else coming up in the future that we'd be interested in?
Well, there's going to be a lot of exciting things happening this year, let's just say that. And so if you follow me on any of the social media, Instagram, William DuVall Official, Facebook, there's William DuVall Music. There's going to be a lot happening. I can't really talk about it all now, but
well, you opened it up for a follow-up interview. Suffice it to say, well, a lot of exciting things coming up.
Yeah. Stay tuned. If you don't follow me, follow me. If you do, stay tuned.
All right. We'll have to leave it at that. William DuVall, it's great catching up with you. It's an interesting story. There's obviously so much more that we could ask you, but like I said, maybe we will do a follow-up interview. In the meantime, congratulations on the Grammy nomination. We're all pulling for you.
Thank you.
And congratulations, much luck, and continued success. Everything else, Alice in Chains, and who knows what else might be coming up. On location at the Framus and Warwick booth with our friend William DuVall of Alice in Chains. at the 2019 Winter NAMM Show. I'm John Liebman. You're watching ForGuitarPlayersOnly.com.